Hey, so welcome to another episode of 10 with Tom, where we get to explore faith 10 minutes at a time. My name is Tom, and today I want to talk about stripping off every weight. You thought I was going to say stripping. Today I'm talking about stripping. No, okay. Stripping off every weight. So when Jess and I were first married, we were very young. I was 23, she was 22. We actually spent a few years traveling and living abroad. And we bought these backpacks, these good old K-Way backpacks. We still have them. They're still going strong 17 years later. And what we did is we decided every country we would go to, we would buy one of those little patches and we would sew that country patch onto our backpack. And by the grace of God, and just had the privilege of traveling to so many different countries, that now the backpack's pretty full with all these different countries that we've managed to travel to over the years. Jess actually on Sunday preached at our campus, and she spoke about these backpacks, and she spoke about, carrying these backpacks around with us in life and when we were traveling, and they can get pretty heavy. And then I was kind of reflecting on this Everest expedition that I had the opportunity to go on. And as I said, I'm going to be sharing some of those stories over the next few weeks. But as part of the marathon run, we had to carry a whole bunch of survival supplies. We had to have a compass, we had to have a whistle, we had to have rain, waterproof gear, headgear, gloves, just things that if something went wrong or we got lost, we could survive for a period until we could get rescued. So we had to have a certain amount of water. And so that actually meant that while we were running this marathon, we were actually running with these backpacks that actually became quite heavy, or certainly heavier than I'm used to running with. And I realized that it's kind of a metaphor for life, because we tend to load our backpacks. We tend to load, as we go through experiences in our life, we tend to sort of put things in the backpack. And sometimes those things are not very helpful and they can be quite heavy. And we end up carrying these things around with us. And I recognize even on the trek with Everest, there were some people who just loaded their backpacks too heavy. And it had an impact on their performance, on their ability to continue on the journey and on the climb. In fact, it actually became a little bit of a joke. We started to, our expedition leader, Dave, we started to slowly, day by day, sneak rocks into his backpack that he only discovered on about day 5 or 6, because he figured, why is this thing getting so heavy? And I think that's a metaphor for life. We tend to pick up kind of unnecessary weight along the way. And that can be shame, guilt, maybe disappointment or resentment or anger or hurt, and it's kind of justified, and we know where it comes from and we can kind of explain it away. But really what all that does, all that shame, all that guilt, all that disappointment, all it does is it weighs us down. And Jesus says in the scriptures, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, yoke is maybe not something that you think of an egg yolk, but a yoke was the thing that they would put over the cattle to pull the plow through the ground. And even then, I was kind of reminded of the yaks that, as you're trekking up to Everest, you have these cows. They're like big furry cows, and they carry all your baggage and propane bottles and water up to these high places. And to be honest, they don't look very happy because they spend their whole lives carrying these heavy loads. And so, when Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, so often I see people walking around with these heavy yokes, carrying these burdens that, to be honest, they're not designed to carry or capable of carrying. And so let me read to you Paul's words in Hebrews chapter 12. And it's kind of famous words. I want to read to you from the NIV version. He says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. In the NLT it says, let us strip off every weight that hinders us. And then he says, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And that's my encouragement. That's Paul's encouragement to us, so that we would not grow weary and lose heart in this race of life. I want to read the Message version to you because it just is such fresh language. He says this, do you see what this means? All these pioneers who blazed the way, all these veterans cheering us on, referring to Hebrews 11 and sort of the heroes of our faith. And then he says, strip down, start running, and never quit. No extra spiritual fat, no parasitic sins. Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race that we're in. Study how he did it, Paul writes, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. that exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way, cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God. When you find yourselves flagging in your faith, and maybe that's you today, he says, go over that story, the story of Jesus again, item by item, that long litany of hostility he plowed through, and that will shoot adrenaline into your souls. I love that. In this all-out match against sin, others have suffered far worse than you, to say nothing of what Jesus went through, all that bloodshed. So don't feel sorry for yourselves. I find these words both inspiring and challenging. He says, keep your eyes on Jesus. And the message says, study how he did it, because he's run this race already. He is our example. He is our model. And there's so many things we could talk about here. Jesus, hey, he knew when to say no and when to say yes. Jesus had great boundaries. Jesus was compassionate. Jesus was humble. Jesus had time for people. Jesus was present. Jesus stayed in constant communion with the Father. There's so many lessons we can take from how Jesus ran the race of life. Jesus never played the victim card. And Paul says here, don't feel sorry for yourselves. People have gone through much harder things, suffered much worse, especially Jesus. Think of the bloodshed, Paul writes. What I'm trying to say is, take out the stones. Unburden yourself. Unload that backpack. Because I think so much, I know for me, and maybe for you, we put so much into the backpack, worries, anxieties, fears that actually we have no control over. I can't control the economy. I can't control, what's happening in the Ukraine. I can't control all these things. And so often we put stuff into the backpack that actually we can do nothing about. Someone said that worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And I think that's so true. This is about trust in our Heavenly Father, because that's what Jesus modeled for us. And again, the reminder from Paul, run the race with endurance, because this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. If I started out that Everest thing just going as fast as I could, I would never have made it to the end. And I think running with endurance means taking rest when we need to rest. It means pacing yourself. It means being kind to yourself. And I want to just kind of leave you with these words. Guys, you are not, whoever's watching this, you're not defined by your past. It was a lesson, not a life sentence. And you don't have to carry that anymore. Don't give your past that power to define who you are. I just know that's true, that you can't start the next chapter of your life if you keep rereading the last one. You're not defined by what they said about you or what you did or what, whatever. So let me read again from NIV. I love these words. It says, therefore, since we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, let us strip off every weight that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles us. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. So I hope that helps you today. I hope that's encouraging, challenging, inspiring. Won't you share this video, or if you subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And thank you so much for joining us for another episode of 10 with Tom.